This week's episode is sponsored by Change. Change is the #1 mentoring programme that teaches you e-commerce from scratch. Change has a real community with real results. I have been working with Ryan for many years now and have attended many of his events and retreats across the world and got to meet members and the amazing community of like-minded people. Ryan works with a lot of big names in the business world, helping them build online businesses and e-commerce. Change offers personal one-on-one support, no experience needed, but like anything, this takes time and is not a get-rich-quick scheme. If you put the work in, you will get the results. E-commerce and online shopping is getting bigger and bigger. This is a great opportunity for anyone that is looking for financial freedom. For more information, go follow Ryan on Instagram at RyanJB, and he will guide you through the steps to help you get started and build a successful online business. You can now follow me on all my social media platforms to find out who my latest guest will be. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you're notified for when my next podcast goes live. And boom, we're on. And today's guest, we've got Andrew Loney. Andrew, how are we?
I'm very good, thanks.
You've just released a book that's making waves all around the world. It's got media headlines. I'm going to promote your book straight away, which is entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, about Prince Andrew, Fergie, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. A lot of information being put out against these people over the last few years. And listen, it takes a lot of courage and balls to go against these sort of people. I believe they can be dangerous in their own way, but there just seems so much media attention behind it. I've had Paul Page on, kind of exposing Andrew. I've had Lady Victoria on, taking sides with him. So it'll be interesting to see your side and your book, which was bestseller. First, where can people buy your book?
Well, I mean, hopefully any bookshop, hopefully Amazon. It should be easy to get.
A lot of interesting stuff. I've covered these stories for many years now, and it's always good to get new information. I found out a lot of new information that we will touch on. But before we get into everything, Andrew, I always like to go back to the start with my guests, get more of a bit of understanding about you, where you grew up, how it all began.
Well, I grew up in Africa. My father was Scottish, my mother's French. And he was working in Africa, and then I lived in Bermuda, and then we came back, and I was just telling your colleague, I went to school in Edinburgh, and then I went to Edinburgh University, and then I came south, and I've worked in publishing for the last 40 years and written books on the side. So I started off writing literary biography, then I wrote books on spies, and then the last 3 books, including this one, have been about the royal family. And I sort of picked the royal family because I like writing about rogues. They're dysfunctional, they're interesting, they're clearly is huge interest. And actually, most books on the royal family don't really get to the nub of the story. I mean, they're pretty hagiographic, and they're sort of written on news cuts. And what I try to do is really dig deep in terms of research, find people to talk to, look at documents, and try and present a slightly different view. And if you've had Paul Page attacking Andrew and you've had Victoria Harvey defending him, I'm the sort of neutral one in the middle. I've tried to be as fair and balanced as I can, but it's a pretty damaging book. I mean, it shows that Andrew is pretty corrupt and supported by members of the royal family. We know, same with Fergie. They were making money by monetizing their position in the royal family. But it's also a story of their marriage. And I think what surprises people is there they are still living together 30 years after they got divorced. So I think what I'm also trying to do in these books is to show when there are establishment cover-ups and to show when history is being censored and the narrative is being curated by rich and powerful people, and to get below that and to expose that and to speak truth to power.
See, I always thought these people were so connected where they run the media
also, where not many stories negatively get put out against these people, but the last few years has totally changed my mind on that, especially with Andrew's interview. He should have never done it. And just sort of the media going after the royal family, the breakup of William and Harry, the Queen dying. It wasn't a positive time. Like, I thought they would have full control. Like, what's the sort of route you have to go down to write against the royal family, basically? What's the legal kind of thing? Is there many things in place?
It's difficult to write about the royal family because they have NDAs with members of staff. There's a parliamentary pattern of not actually asking questions about the royal family. They're not part of the Freedom of Information Act. People who know them tend to keep very quiet and not want to talk about their relationship with them. So it's quite difficult. There are no documents. You've got to really dig quite hard, and the cuts aren't always accurate. So I approached about 3,000 people. I think about a tenth of those responded. I think I've got about 100 interviews on the record in the book. So it's quite difficult. But once, I've got some good people who serve with Andrew in the Navy, people who worked with him when he was a special trade envoy, school friends of him and Fergie. So eventually I got a lot of people, more than I think any other book has managed on the royals.
How much research how long did that take?
It's 4 years of research. So I had about 12 lever arch files of material on them. I had literally almost a day-by-day account of their lives going back to the 1960s. So I could really tell what was happening at any time, who they met, and what they were up to. I mean, clearly a lot of the stuff, it goes under the radar. You don't know what they're doing. But, by doing some interviews with people who knew them quite well, I was able to sort of fill in the gaps.
That's a great journalist for me, someone who takes their time. I interview people. There's not much research there because I don't have all the information within 24 hours. Someone can message me, I've got this information, a podcast, it could be utter shite or it could be 100% accurate. But I think to go down that route of taking your time, 12 months, 3 years, 4 years, to find out exactly the information, good and bad, I think is important.
Well, I've tried to be as fair as I can, but as you say, it's difficult to get the information. But everything had to be sort of double-sourced. I had to get people to sign off saying that it was accurate. I mean, clearly there are legal problems when you write about contemporaries, people who are still living. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that we had to take out for legal reasons or because I just couldn't support it with, for example, 2 people's testimony.
So let's go back to Andrew's life, the start of his life as a kid. What was it like?
Well, he was born in 1960, a few months after Fergie. He's the Queen's third child, the second son. He comes 10 years after Princess Anne. He's kind of part of a second family. The Queen is a bit more relaxed by then. She spends a bit more time with him. She kind of spoils him. So he has no boundaries. He has very little discipline. He's a very naughty boy, very boisterous, mischievous. And I think in some ways the man is very like the child. I mean, he's been used to getting away with things and not being told off. He thinks he's pretty arrogant. He's not very bright. He feels very entitled. He's a prince. He can do what he wants. And that attitude has really followed him all the way through his life.
See, it's funny because even when I watched the interview, that's exactly how. My words aren't very articulate. I don't have the vocabulary, but that's how I would describe him. As if the world owes him something, as if the other people are stupid. When he was doing that interview,
yeah,
it's like he's speaking as if people are thick that can't see through bullshit because he's probably had it all his own way his whole life or nobody's ever questioned him. So when he's speaking, he's thinking they're going to do the exact same. But the thing about the UK public, we're very switched on.
Yeah,
we're very switched on. We can smell bullshit. We're working class people where we can see things differently. So he's not at that level, and it's mad to think that he ever done that interview, which we'll touch on. One of the things you've got in your book is Prince Andrew lost his virginity at 11. Now that's very young.
Yeah,
even in today's standards, even back then is very young. Even today, you've got a lot of young kids. A lot of people are sexually active in schools. You've got porn everywhere, but for then it seems very young, especially for royalty. What's the story when Prince Andrew lost his virginity?
Well, it's a story I sort of hesitated about putting in. I wasn't sure it was true. I was worried it might not be true because it seemed so amazing. But it came from a member of his own staff. In fact, I had some people who were at school with him who had similar sorts of stories. And I think what appears to have happened is the father of a friend of his took him off to a brothel and sort of inducted him into sex. I mean, it's sort of a form of abuse. And you can understand that with a girl, for example, but it's very odd to see that for a man or a boy. But I think it kind of explains, what I see as a sex addiction. I mean, he's constantly needs sex. It's a bit like Epstein, this constant search for gratification. And I think that possibly comes from this experience at the age of 11.
Yeah, that is abuse. To take a young kid at 11 to a brothel to have sex, like that is wrong on so many levels, but it does explain a lot. It does make sense why the name Randy Andy comes in, But what about the sexual abuse? Was Prince Andrew sexually abused?
Well, I mean, I think I did a book on Lord Mountbatten, who is his great uncle, and he was a paedophile, and he was abused as a child. And I suspect that there is a similar pattern here with Andrew, that something clearly happened as a young boy that has shaped his sexual tastes, his sexual behavior as an adult. But if he was to do a really honest interview on Newsnight, then that would be very interesting to discover.
Yeah, it's sad as well, though, if he thinks he's been abused, because the stats are now, it's 1 in 3 who've been abused become abusers themselves. The stats are pretty high. What was it like at school?
Well, he's very lazy. He's not very bright. He kind of got other people to do the work for him. He's quite a good sportsman. Went to Gordonston, where the other members of the royal family had gone, where his father had gone. But a pretty average student. But he was, as you say, Randy Andy. He was very popular with the girls. He was very good looking. King Charles said he had the Robert Redford looks. And actually, we forget he was a very popular member of the royal family. People would mob him rather like the Beatles if they went to opening the Christmas tree lights at Oxford Circus and stuff. So it's sad to see how he's fallen from grace, because he was seen as the great white hope.
Yeah, but when you say falling from grace, it is a big fall that he's had. So what was his steps then after school?
So after school, he wanted to join the Navy. He wasn't very academic. He trained as a pilot in the Fleet Air Arm. Quite soon after he joined in 1979, the Falklands came along in 1982. He was sent down to the Falklands to guard the aircraft carrier Invincible as one of the Sea King pilots. He had a pretty good war. He did his bit. He didn't see frontline fighting, but he was back there guarding the aircraft carrier, checking for submarines, trying to do the decoy work on the Exocet missiles, doing a lot of what we call the milk run, taking post and troops between ships. But he was working in dangerous conditions. It was dark, and accidents happened. And according to people I talked to, he did what was required of him. And I think it shows that when he's focused and given the purpose, he can rise to the occasion.
So he was a war hero.
Well, I wouldn't say he was a great hero. I mean, he was like all the people who went down to the Falklands. They did their bit, and they were brave and professional. I think he deserves some respect for that.
So when did they come back from the Falklands? What was his life then? Did they come back a hero? Did the media portray him as this war hero, even though it's bare minimum to become a hero? He's not as if he's frontline.
Yeah, he won Gallantry Awards and things. Yeah. Where they came back in the autumn of 1982, and that sort of is the high point. I mean, he's as you say, he's kind of fated as a war hero. Clearly, the press make a big thing of it. The palace, of course, used this very much as a useful way of making the monarchy seem more attractive. But he begins to, he's got these flaws in his character, and these begin to come through. So he gets involved, for example, with one called Vicky Hodge in a very public affair when he's in Barbados. He turns a paint gun on journalists, causing lots of damage, doing that just for fun. And soon he becomes quite an unpopular figure. But not that unpopular. By 1986, when he meets Fergie, introduced by Diana, they have this very, very quick courtship, and he's still a pretty popular figure. I mean, people, lots of people watched the wedding. I think there were millions watched it on TV. So, in some ways, his fall for grace was quite gradual. And of course, he was always away in the Navy. So, of course, that made his relationship with Fergie difficult. He wanted to come back at weekends and just relax, watch TV and play golf. She wanted to party. So the marriage, quickly got into difficulties, and they've soon began to have affairs. And I suppose the best known episode is when she was caught with her financial advisor having her toes sucked in the south of France. And I think when the Queen saw this, which made huge newspaper headlines, she said, look, enough's enough, you need to separate. So they actually only had 6 years before they separated, 10 years before they got divorced. And that's why, I think it's a slightly strange situation because they still live together in Royal Lodge. And she describes themselves as the happiest divorced couple ever. But actually, their marriage only lasted a few years.
Could they have potentially still been with each other, but they just portrayed themselves as being single?
I think they like to be single. I think, both of them quite she likes being part of the royal family, which is why she's never really left the royal family. She's never let go of Andrew. She's made him feel very guilty for being a bad husband. And I think he likes the idea of being able to play the field, but still be the doting father and husband. So it's a system that clearly works for them both. And they remain good friends. I think they were good parents. It's slightly hard for other people to imagine, but both had lots and lots of lovers. But that's a very sort of aristocratic thing, royal thing.
Did Fergie have a lot of lovers?
Yes, she did, yes.
Did she? A lady of the night, was she?
Well, I don't know if she was Lady of the Night, but there's certainly, and I list them in the book, I mean, she was very attracted, always attracted to quite rich people, often attracted to Americans, but she was involved with an Italian count, with the man who ran Findus Foods, with a young film entrepreneur, with a Texas billionaire. So, I mean, she's had a lot of relationships, and even with the brother of her best friend who died when she was quite young. So, I mean, we don't really hear about them, but we hear about Andrew's affairs, and there have been dozens and dozens of them, from short sort of one-night stands to slightly more sustained relationships. And actually, what's interesting about his relationships is they're often with highly intelligent, successful women that you wouldn't think would be interested in him. But I think, clearly people like to say that they went out with a prince.
Yeah, I think it's the power thing. I think it's the prince thing. You could look like the worst person in the world, but sort of having that prince and royalty. We know now the amount of girls who sell themselves short to sit in a yacht or sit in that fancy car or the big house while the fat husband goes out and does his thing. Women have lost a lot of respect for themselves nowadays. They're not ladylike. And listen, you don't have a lot of gentlemen anymore either, but it's funny to see royalty who should have a set standard, who should lead by example, who should be prim, who should be proper, who should have respect for themselves and others. It feels as if the royal family's just completely falling apart.
Well, I think these two have fallen apart. I mean, clearly the other members of the royal family do their duty, don't get into scandal, have apparently happy marriages. So, I think of Prince Edward and Sophie, Prince William and Catherine. So I think that, what strikes me is that what Fergie and Andrew have done is rather undermine the work that the other members of the royal family do, the public duties that they do, and they're kind of taking the mickey out of them by basically just following whatever suits them and not following any sense of public duty.
So who introduced Fergie? Was it Princess Diana introduced Fergie to Prince Andrew?
Yep. So Princess Diana and Fergie's mother were at school together. I think they're maybe related to each other. They certainly were friends. And I think Diana could see that Fergie wasn't very happy. She had been in a long-term relationship with a much older man who didn't want to marry her, called Paddy McNally. Andrew hadn't been allowed to marry the woman he wanted to, the actress Koo Stark. And Diana thought they'd get on, and they did. They were, physically attracted to each other. They were had the same sense of humor, ready to settle down. And so, actually, when it started, the marriage, seemed to be a good thing. And I think everyone, a bit like with Meghan Markle, and there are lots of parallels actually between Meghan Markle and Harry and Andrew and Fergie. In some ways, Fergie's been doing for 30 years what Meghan was hoping to do, half in, half out, commercialize, her royal position. Harry is the same as Andrew, within the discipline of the armed services, he can be, focused and do great things. But when he's not got that structure, he can get up to all sorts of, bad behavior.
When did the name Randy Andy come about? Was that always there from a young age, or was it not?
It was. From a teenager, he was known as Randy Andy. As you say, known as Baby Grumpling when he started. He was a very sort of difficult child, but yeah, he always was able to attract girls and young women.
Yeah, he seemed a bit of a mummy's boy. Was that correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, he had a very close relationship with his mother.
Was he not the favourite?
He was the favourite of the Queen, and she was his great protector. And I think one of the shocking things to find in the book was that, she protected him even when he was up to mischief. So when he was doing some pretty corrupt things as a trade envoy, even when scandals were emerging with Epstein, she'd give him promotion, make him vice admiral in the Navy. She'd sit beside him on the way to church, showing that she believed him, that she had faith in him. And I think a lot of people began to think, well, maybe, the accusations made against him aren't fair if the Queen is supporting him. But in fact, she kind of put her son and her own family ahead of the monarchy, which I think may surprise some people.
When did his relationship with Epstein start? Because people say it was the late 1990s, but you're saying it was the early 1990s.
Yeah, according to his private secretary, Alistair Watson, who wrote a letter to the Times, the relationship began in the early 90s. There's a guy called Steve Hoffenberg, who was one of Epstein's business associates, also says beginning of the 1990s. And Andrew and Fergie both said that the relationship ended in 2010, 2011. Well, it's now emerging, one, that Andrew was in contact with Epstein after that. And I've shown that she was actually staying in Epstein's flats, as late as 2013. So I think we can't really take at face value anything that they say.
Surely these people are vetted before they come around royalty, or are they just so relaxed that they're around to be anyone? Allowed to be around anyone? Sure, it's like when you look at the Jimmy Savile thing, like it's mind blowing to me that there's got to be some fuckery for these people to be allowed in this company. Same as Epstein. Even when Epstein was a maths teacher, he was kicked out for abusing young girls. So they've already got that before he was even charged. Surely they get vetted.
Well, you would think so. You would think there would be due diligence and they would pick up information. After all, people knew what Fergie was like because her father was King Charles's polo manager. She moved in the same circles. But I think, Andrew was keen to marry her, and I think they tried to do what they could to sort of, for example, there were some pretty incriminating nude pictures of her, which they kind of gathered up. I think they just hope for the best. And, same with Meghan Markle. Very hard to prevent. I mean, they'd already prevented him from marrying Koo Stark. It was going to be quite hard to prevent him from marrying Fergie.
How did their relationship start, Epstein and Prince Andrew?
Well, it's a good question because, though we know that they met in the early 1990s, we don't know exactly how they met. Ghislaine says that it was Fergie who introduced them. Other people say that they met through Ghislaine Maxwell introduced Andrew to Epstein. So there's still quite a lot of research to be done about that period. But they were moving in the same social circles. Ghislaine and Fergie were sort of the great sort of society hostesses in New York in the 1990s. So I suspect, the two of those met, and because Ghislaine was the girlfriend of Epstein, Epstein was introduced to Fergie, and then Fergie introduced him to Andrew. And, for Epstein, it was fantastic. Respectability, status, someone with some useful contacts. And for Andrew, here was someone who, again, had good contacts, who was rich and given a lifestyle that he couldn't perhaps afford himself. He had the ranch in New Mexico, he had the island in the Caribbean, the biggest house in Manhattan, a huge house down in Palm Beach. And both Fergie and Andrew loved being with rich people. And of course, eventually Epstein would begin to pay Andrew's bills, or basically Fergie's debts, and provide him with a ready supply of young women, which is what Andrew needed.
When we talk about young women, how young?
Well, the most of them were in their early 20s. We don't know all the women that he slept with. We know that Virginia Giuffre was 17 when she claimed she slept with him.
Which isn't a crime if it was in the UK.
It's not a crime.
To be fair. But there are much as the fingers can be pointed, you've still got to address, yeah, she was 17. Yes, it's young, but it's still not a crime.
But I was going to say that there were also girls of 15. And there's a lot of stuff I wasn't able to put in the book because we needed to get testimony from the girls to support it. But there's plenty of evidence that he was involved with girls that were a lot younger than 17.
Yeah, that's different then. Because even though when I interviewed Paul Page, who was the bodyguard in Buckingham Palace,
he was at the Buckingham.
He did say, to be fair, when Prince Andrew used to come in with girls used to come up to the gate and say his name. He never ever seen any underage girls. People talk about maybe tunnels under the Buckingham Palace or whatever, I don't know, but Anybody can come in. I'd imagine if it was a younger kid, they would probably disguise it or try and take.
No, I think the women that he brought back to Buckingham Palace were, in their early 20s or older. And I mean, he has dated women the same age as him, but it was certainly when he was abroad in places like Kazakhstan and Libya, he was involved with much younger girls.
How young?
Well, I know of some of 15. There could have been some younger. The people that were being trafficked by Epstein to the island, he worked through a man called Jean-Luc Brunel, who ran a model agency in France. And a lot of these girls from France, and particularly from Russia, many of whom didn't speak any English, were 12, 13, 14, that sort of age.
How did Epstein actually get his money? I've interviewed people who says he befriended a billionaire who was dying. He kind of gave him his wealth. People say Epstein worked with the CIA, and they said he was working with a lot of, not an accountant, but he was managing a lot of people's money. He was managing a lot of people's wealth.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, people don't really know. I mean, he was sacked as a maths teacher. He worked in the city for a big company called Bear Stearns and got sacked there. I think he made some very useful connections. There's some suggestion that he met Robert Maxwell, and Robert Maxwell used basically Epstein to hide his money before his death, which is the link then with Ghislaine. He seems to become friendly with this man called Lex Wexner, who gave him power of attorney, basically handed him his house. Very strange. Lex Wexner is still alive now in his 90s, but why this very successful billionaire should trust Epstein is very odd. There's talk of him being a bounty hunter for people, chasing down monies that were owed. He seems to have been a sort of investment advisor to people and made money for people. He was very, very mathematically gifted, and he seemed to be able to work out algorithms in business and in finance. But no one really knows the story, and whether we will ever know now that he's dead is a moot point.
Yeah, money laundering as well was one of the things that people says. It's just interesting how the relationship even started. When did Ghislaine Maxwell come into the picture? Because I've heard that Prince Andrew was also having a relationship with Ghislaine.
Yes, I mean, well, some people say that Ghislaine and Andrew met in the 1980s. I think it's more likely in the 1990s. But they did have an on-off relationship, a business relationship and a sexual relationship. It was one of the things that Epstein got a bit of a kick from, that his girlfriend was also sleeping with Prince Andrew. So there were some very strange sexual dynamics going on. I think Ghislaine was desperately in love with Epstein. He clearly, made her a kept woman. She, in return, was basically his chief procurer for young girls, his sort of office manager. And she did a lot of business deals, for example, with Andrew. So it was a very tight little group, the three of them.
Because we talk about like Jimmy Savile's and the Epsteins, even the P. Diddy's, they talk about P. Diddy having a lot of video footage. It's like these people have got leverage over someone. They've put people in compromised positions. And Prince Andrew's an easy target. If he's a sex addict and you've got a lot of women on the go who can then come to Prince Andrew, he's just going to come back for more. He seems too thick to not see the bigger picture or the patterns, or it seems you could manipulate him very easy. That's what I get from him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we just don't know what secrets he's given away, and indeed perhaps Fergie as well. In return for these large sums of money she was given. But he was compromised by lots of people, not just by Epstein, who had cameras in all his homes and would have these honey traps. He would, be filming people with these young girls, which clearly was against the law. But when he went abroad on these trips in Kazakhstan and Libya and China, Russia, he was also being filmed. So, and all that stuff must be somewhere and may well one day emerge on the internet.
See that man, was it Les Wexner?
Les Wexner, yes.
Les Wexner. Do you think he could have also been put in a compromised position? Maybe Epstein was giving him girls and then he's used it as blackmail to get these properties and get all this money, because no one just hands their money over.
Well, exactly. That's one of the great mysteries. Lex Wexner was a secret homosexual, so it would have been young boys that might have been provided. So that's certainly a possibility. He certainly, what Epstein did was he traded information. He blackmailed people. He picked up information. He swapped it. He reported back to a whole series of organizations, Mossad, It's said now he was a CIA informant. This information was currency for him, and he would use it however it best suited him.
Do you think he's seen Fergie and Prince Andrew as an easy target then?
Absolutely. I mean, people described it like a rattlesnake and a mouse. I mean, Andrew, was set up time and time again, including the walk in Central Park. Epstein knew the paparazzi were outside, that if he went for a walk with Andrew, it would sort of reinforce to the world that, Andrew was still there, he was still his friend. And that would be very useful to him.
Is there any information on why Andrew went to that meeting?
Well, I mean, there are lots of explanations. I mean, he went, I think, looking for some more money for Fergie. He went ostensibly to say goodbye, but I mean, he spent 5 days doing that. He certainly had some business things he wanted to do, particularly through Manoeuvres, the bank, so the stockbroker. So, there were several purposes to it. But, if he wanted to say goodbye, he could easily have done that over the phone or email.
Why would Prince Andrew not have his own money? And Fergie being royalty?
Well, I mean, they do have money, and they've made money over the years. But the thing is, they're pretty greedy. They're pretty extravagant. They go through more money than perhaps can bring in, and they're constantly looking for fresh opportunities to make money. However much money they've got. So, Epstein provided some of these opportunities and contacts.
So that's just greed.
It's greed, yeah, absolutely.
And they're giving away valuable information, possibly from the UK, to these bigger countries, say, not China, Russia, possibly Mossad. Is that a possibility where they're giving away valuable
we don't know what information they gave, but and what the deal was. I mean, Epstein must have expected something back for paying off Fergie's debts. And we do know from a whole range of sources that Andrew was compromised, that there is incriminating footage of him in bed with women. Possibly younger woman. So, I mean, how has he been compromised? What has he told people? I mean, he was in the Ministry of Defense. He would have picked up information as a trade envoy, particularly doing things like arms sales. He would have been aware of family gossip, for example. So, who knows what information he's passed on.
How much debt did they pay off of Fergie's?
Well, I think the sums generally talked about are about £5 million.
How's a lot of money run up so much debt?
Well, she very extravagant. She had expensive rents for extensive staff. She travelled widely in expensive, always went first class, business class. She stayed in 5-star hotels. She gave away lots of presents. I think, it was quite easy to go through large sums of money. And because it was coming in quite easily, working at Weight Watchers or she was promoting Wedgwood China, because the money came easily, she thought that it was going to carry on like that. But she made some bad business decisions. One of the companies she set up sort of went bust. And there was a bit of a spiral there. But I think one of the sad things is that, she didn't pay a lot of her bills. She didn't pay lawyers. She didn't pay the news agents, butchers, people who had lent her money. And so time and time again, she was being taken to court for not settling her bills.
Yeah, it seems very messy with this lot. It doesn't seem nothing's plain sailing, nothing's well organised. It just seems all dark, very low vibrational. So what happens then after the 90s when they sort of, Epstein and Andrew meet, Fergie, they get divorced pretty soon.
They get divorced in 96, 10 years after they get married.
So what happens then, early 2000s?
Well, I mean, he's out of the Navy. He leaves the Navy at the beginning of 2001. He's got as far as he's going to get. People feel they've got to give him a job. And so he's made this trade envoy. The belief is that members of the royal family might be able to, for example, to persuade rulers in the Middle East or others to do things that perhaps politicians couldn't do. And I think he goes into it with the best of intentions, but quite quickly he gets corrupted. He conceives opportunities to make money for himself. He gets lazy. He sees it as an opportunity to meet girls and play golf. There's no proper supervision of him. The structure is he's sort of reporting to the Foreign Office, to the Department of Trade and Industry, to the Palace, and as a result, he's not reporting to anyone. And that's just put complaints in, saying this is a waste of time. He's often counterproductive, and they don't really want to see him. But if they do that, they often find their careers are penalized. So they begin to say nothing. And so he kind of gets away with it. He knows he's protected and he just begins to take advantage of the situation.
How many scandals have been out about Prince Andrew?
Oh, and there are dozens. I mean, when you read the book, you'll find there's almost something on every page, whether it's Air Miles Andy choosing to go by helicopter rather than the car, or Randy Andy with all these women that he's involved with, often basically bypassing any security concerns, or he's involved in dodgy deals between dictators trying to take a cut. They're countless, and he should have been shut down much earlier. People were complaining, literally a year after he started as trade envoy, and yet he was allowed to continue for 10 years doing it.
How do you shut down someone, though, from the royal family?
Well, I think he could have been sacked as trade envoy, which is what happened eventually. He could have been disciplined. I mean, it's odd that Prince Philip, for example, didn't read him the Riot Act. He could have been much more supervised, so he didn't, for example, use his time when he was abroad to see prostitutes and play golf. There are a lot of things that could be done, but people kind of washed their hands of him, and he was able then to get up to whatever he wanted to do.
What about the story with the 40 girls in the hotel room?
Well, I think one of the places he used to go and do a lot of his playing, shall we say, was in Thailand. I think it's 2004 he went off for the celebrations for the King of Thailand. He stayed for 4 days. He had 40 prostitutes brought into him in that space of time, also doing official duties. He had his half-Thai girlfriend, Sonia Cooling, also there. And I think people were pretty shocked. I had both a diplomat, a local journalist, and in fact a member of the Thai royal family describe what went on there.
What a greedy bastard. 40 girls.
In 4 days.
One's hard work. I was saying, never mind 40. Does that then show you how much you've kind of perverted? People, listen, I'm not asked about people having orgies or sex parties or having multiple girls, but having 40 girls, and then it's the underage girls, it's a massive concern. These people are freaky. You tend to see a lot of people who've got too much money, too much power. They don't know where they can get that next thrill, and you'll tend to see that's when they do the dark stuff. That's when you do the right.
I think that's right. I mean, I think he was looking for the next big thing, and I think Epstein took advantage of that. And Epstein, of course, had his own taste for young girls. So, I mean, the two became sort of partners in crime. We have witnesses with Andrew on the island with young girls, including possibly Virginia Giuffre. So, I mean, when people concentrate on the photograph and the visit to Tramp, there's plenty of other evidence linking Andrew with young girls and indeed with Virginia Giuffre. And I've certainly know of several women who were sleeping with Andrew who were pretty young.
How many times was Andrew on the island?
Well, we certainly have one episode. The information comes from the flight logs of one of Epstein's jets, but there were other jets that we don't have the flight logs for. There's a reference to an AP, which could be Andrew, which we don't know. So he wasn't. There were often code names used. So we don't know, but I mean, certainly there are a lot of witnesses who saw him on the island, and we have gaps in his schedule where he could have been at the island. He actually, for example, delayed going on holiday with his family in the Bahamas in order to stay longer on the island with Epstein.
But why would these people in high-profile places even write down on a flight log? Why would they keep names on a flight log, especially if they were up to no good?
Well, remember that Epstein was keeping these records. Epstein, had needed these records if he was going to blackmail people. It was all part of collecting information he could use against them. I think it is pretty standard for when you file your flight plan that the the aircraft controllers know how many people, for example, on the plane and who they are. So I don't think that's that surprising. But it has been a very useful source for journalists and me.
What about Bill Clinton? Was he not there 16 or 26 times?
Yes, Bill Clinton is certainly, was on the flight logs, and there's certainly quite a lot of evidence showing that he went to the island and he was involved. I mean, he, and had dinner with Epstein. Clinton's excuse is that this was all to do with some of his foundations. It was all highly professional. There were Secret Service people there. But, there's one, rather odd picture of him having a massage by a woman called Shante Davis. So, and certainly a number of people, including Virginia Giuffre, have said that Clinton was one of the people who was benefiting from these girls being sent.
Because when you look at the Clintons, the amount of people who have died, who work for them, you're talking 20, 30, 40 people. It's a lot of numbers.
Yes, I mean, clearly there's been a lot of controversy and scandal around the Clintons, and what's interesting is how they've managed to shut the story down. Everything's been focused on people like Andrew, and we haven't really heard about some of the Americans. I mean, Richard Branson's been named, George Mitchell, who's an American politician. Peter Mandelson clearly has now just been outed. So there are many more names, which I hope will come out, but which haven't so far.
How the fuck is Stephen Hawking there? Like, if he's there and they're getting underage girls from him, that's fucking weird, man.
Well, I mean, we don't know what happened with Stephen Hawking. Certainly, Epstein had this great interest in science, so a lot of scientists went on these trips, and so it may have been entirely innocent. And that's one of his tricks, that he kind of cloaked a lot of this stuff that was under the radar with stuff that appeared to be, completely legitimate.
Yeah, that's the sad thing, because a lot of these people getting caught up in these scandals, getting photos with Jimmy Savile or Epstein, like I said earlier to a guest, if P. Diddy offered me to a party 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have went, because I'm thinking networking, business, not really knowing what's going on. You get a photo with them, and then the scandals break 4 or 5 years later. It doesn't mean
you want to distance yourself.
Yeah,
exactly.
But it doesn't mean you're involved as well. But it must be how he's manipulated it with getting good people there as well, like scientists. But then again, with Epstein's past, if you're going to be friends with him, then there's something not right either, because it was in the public domain.
Sup with the devil. The Queen was, dealing with sort of dodgy dictators, and that, because it was important for trade deals. I suspect a lot of them felt, well, Epstein's putting a lot of money into my foundation or my university or whatever, and therefore I've just got to hold my nose and hope this doesn't come out, and just go along with him. So one can see where they were coming from.
What about the painting with Bill Clinton?
Well, there are a lot of very strange, bits of artwork in the houses. The picture of Clinton in Monica Lewinsky's dress, the famous stained dress from the oral sex, was a weird thing, particularly if Clinton was going there. Yeah, I think there were nude pictures of Ghislaine Maxwell and indeed other girls there. You couldn't have gone there and not realize it was very strange and probably a bit dodgy.
What about the Twin Towers with George Bush? Was that a fake photo or was that real?
I don't know. Is there a picture?
Yeah, there's Twin Towers with George Bush sitting at the Twin Towers with a paper plane.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. But yeah, I mean, Epstein was very sort of inventive and cheeky. I think he liked being a disruptor. So he would have had sort of rather subversive images, I suspect, in the house.
I'm going to actually Google that because you're very well informed, so I don't want to put any garbage out there.
That's okay.
Oh no, I don't think he's at the Twin Towers. Is that photo?
Oh, right. Gosh, amazing. Yeah. I mean, he was very close, Epstein, to, Ehud Barak, leaders in Israel. I mean, clearly Clinton. World famous scientists. I mean, he had a whole network. He collected people.
Jenga. It was Jenga things with Bush holding the paper airplane, which is very strange.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, Epstein clearly, trying to get inside his mind, is difficult because, I mean, he clearly, had these very strange ideas. And you're right, people should have perhaps, run a mile, but I think they probably thought it wouldn't come out. I mean, he had by this stage served a year in prison as a convicted for soliciting a young girl for prostitution. So, people should have been distancing themselves. But I think, he was a very generous host. He was providing money for them, contacts, and I think people just turned a blind eye.
Because the media post with him getting sent to prison, it was very tiny. It wasn't a big post. It wasn't a two-page spread or front page. It was very tiny because I don't think it had the media attention. I don't think it was as popular, but it was a very small print in the post.
Exactly. And when he went to prison, he actually came out for the day and could go to his office. He was actually allowed to go to the island. He only slept in the prison at night. So it was like, a Premier Inn. So, I think a lot of people who would have seen him in daily contact may not have realized what happened. I mean, there'd been some publicity when he stood trial. There was some coverage, but people can choose to ignore things if it suits them.
How many times was Prince Andrew actually with Epstein? Has there anybody got a number?
No, it's difficult to evaluate. I mean, he certainly stayed sufficiently often at the house in New York for a special suite of rooms called the Britannia Suite to be put aside for him. We have, let's say, lots of witnesses seeing him at the ranch in Palm Beach and on the island. So, Andrews pretended this was a pretty sort of distant relationship, but actually, no, they were very, very close. And I've got quotes in the book talking about how close that relationship was. I think the lines from Epstein, he was like, a bit like with Trump, he's my best buddy. He shares my interest in sex. He's the king of kink. This was the sort of discussion you might have about someone you're pretty close to rather than a casual friend.
Yeah, because even the meetings, that's not including the phone calls, the emails, the text messages. You don't know what's getting exchanged.
Well, I mean, there are 18 numbers for Fergie in the Black Book, 16 for Andrew. So, I mean, there must have been quite a lot of communication. We hopefully will have the release of the Epstein papers soon, and the talk of it, hundreds of references to Andrew there. It depends what's being weeded out. So, I think that we've got some of the witnesses, the victims, prepared to go onto Capitol Hill and make statements. We've got Virginia Giuffre's own book coming out next month. So there's a lot of stuff that could come in that could make Andrew's life pretty difficult and kind of expose the lies that he's told.
Could he go to prison?
Well, I think it's very unlikely that anyone would bring charges against him, but I certainly think he's worth investigating. But I think that people don't want to go there, so they've used every excuse so far, both the National Crime Agency and the Metropolitan Police, to avoid doing anything which would kind of have unintended consequences, shall we say.
And what about the letter Fergie wrote to to Epstein? What was the letter that Fergie wrote to Epstein?
Well, I think that the line when in 2010, when Andrew broke off with Epstein, was that we suddenly realised he's a paedophile. We don't want anything more to do with him. We're going to cut all our links. And yet Andrew was writing to him saying, shall we play again in 2011? Now this letter is from 2011 from Fergie. It's a letter to him apologizing for being rude about him in public, and saying you're my, great friend, and you're a victim of it like me, of everything, and basically let's be great friends. So in public, she's distancing herself and saying this is awful man, I have nothing more to do with him. And in private, she's actually saying absolutely the opposite. And indeed, I found that she was staying in Epstein's flats for many years after this. So that doesn't suggest, and this is for a woman who professes to be promoting children's books, to be a great supporter of charities connected with young children. This is a pretty toxic reputation to have. If on one side, quietly, you're actually basically supporting these people, and in public, you're saying you'll have nothing more to do with them.
And how was the relationship between Epstein and Glenn? Were they in a relationship, lovers?
Yes, I think Ghislaine was a lover of Epstein to start with. I think she then found that he couldn't sustain a normal relationship. She did eventually move on to someone else, but she remained as his sort of right-hand person, and she was one of the people who helped recruit the girls. She organized things. She was a very sophisticated, highly intelligent, well-educated woman. He was a rather gauche New Yorker, and so she was able to allow him to punch above his weight in terms of who he met.
Because now we've got the Epstein files that there was no flight logs and there was no this and they had no one working for him, but Glenn is doing 20 years in prison. Was she bringing young girls to these high-profile names?
Yes. I mean, she was, they had a sort of Ponzi scheme where, she would recruit girls who in turn would recruit other girls. And, there is a justifiable criticism of Virginia Giuffre that she wasn't entirely a victim. She was also a predator. But, we've got to remember that these girls were very damaged. They were very scared. Fergie was scared about a phone call. Think what these poor girls who really had no support system around them. They weren't in touch with their families. And therefore entirely reliant on Epstein. They kind of had to do his will. So I think we need to give them a little bit be a little generous towards them, because clearly some of them were not entirely innocent of helping Ghislaine, but Ghislaine was sort of at the top of the pile. She was the kind of brains behind it. She'd helped fix girls for Andrew actually when they were in Britain, and now she just fixed girls, slightly younger girls, for Epstein.
How many charges did Epstein eventually have?
Well, he was only actually charged with soliciting prostitution with a minor. There were a lot of other charges which he was let off. One of the lines was that this man was involved in intelligence and therefore to give him an easy ride, and that's the excuse that Acosta gives. So who knows whether there was some cover-up or there was genuine reasons to give him an easy ride. And maybe these papers, once they come out, will shed some light on that.
And who else was involved with Epstein? What other big names? Because you've got names like, who's the actor? You had Chris Tucker. You had, who was the guy, Steph, that was in Usual Suspects with a peg leg?
It was Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey. You had a lot of big actors on those lists as well, but a lot of people says it was for charity work as well. I'm a big fan of both. Great actors, great movies, but again, if you fly more than once with Epstein, there's got to be alarm bells ringing.
Yes, I mean, I think now when we look at the cold light of day and in hindsight, a lot of these things look very suspicious, and a lot of these people are not speaking, which again is pretty suspicious. So, as I say, we can only hope that there will be more disclosures from legal documents, from the Epstein files, from other witnesses and victims. To try and give us a fuller picture of actually what happened. I think, poor old Andrew has kind of been the focus, but there are clearly many, many more names that should eventually emerge, even if it's not Trump. I mean, Trump clearly has kind of taken himself out of all these files. So I think it's very unlikely there'll be anything incriminating against him there.
Do you think Prince Andrew's been thrown under the bus to deflect away from others?
Yeah, I think he was easy pickings. He's low-hanging fruit. He's not very bright, not easy to it's unlikely he'll sue. So, and I think he's just not very clever. So other people have been much more adept at hiding their involvement or have got better lawyers to see things off.
So what was Prince Andrew ever charged with Virginia Giuffre?
Well, Andrew's never been charged with anything. I mean, people have asked for him to be investigated. He's never even been investigated. So at the moment, we have a civil case, which was brought by Virginia Giuffre, which is the one that he settled. And that's it. There could be grounds for a criminal case for sex trafficking, even though she was 17. There could be, I think that there are certainly grounds for some of his behavior as a trade envoy, where he seems to be taking bribes from companies nothing to do with British trade. The other area to look at is, a couple of court cases where he's emerged as having earned large sums of money, which he can't explain away, and people suspect as money laundering. And he needs to make a statement. He needs to explain where this money is coming from and why he was paid. And that's true of Fergie as well, because the fact that they remain silent about these mysterious sums suggests that they're not entirely above board.
So how much did Prince Andrew actually pay out? Was it 12 million? Is that number correct?
Yes, various sums get thrown about. $12 million is one of the more reputable sums.
Why not take it through the kind of civil court? Why not take it through and fight his name and fight his corner? Because as soon as you pay that, no matter why you paid that, if you're innocent and don't want the sort of heat from the media, you're guilty in my eyes.
Yeah, well, the line was, it was the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. She didn't want it overshadowed by court cases and embarrassing headlines, and it basically took a bullet for the firm. But, people will say, well, £12 million is a lot of money to spend just to, for someone you didn't meet. So I think, most people think that there is something to the story and that he basically paid her hush money. And it did shut it down for a while. But of course, there are always news disclosures coming forward. And so he hasn't been able to shut the case down.
Because, like you said, Prince Andrew says he's never met this girl. The photo's fake. He doesn't sweat. He was at Pizza Express. Like, it was a lot of madness to it. Is this because I had Lady Victoria on, who says the photo's been edited? What is the truth with that photo in that house with Ghislaine Maxwell leaning against the wall?
Well, the truth is that the photo is absolutely accurate. There are 20 copies of it. 19 of them people have seen. The 20th is with the FBI, who are perfectly happy with it. It's numbered. Lots of people saw the photo at the time it was taken, including Virginia's boyfriend at the time, Tony Figueroa, her father, Sky Roberts, her best friend, Caroline Andriamo. So, I mean, this is stuff that I suspect Victoria Harvey doesn't talk about. There wasn't the technology at the time to adjust photos. It's photo experts have looked at it, and it's very clearly stamped by Walmart 3 days later, which is near where she lived. Michael Thomas, who took the photos of the photo, is a very reputable photojournalist who has sworn that it was an original that he saw. The woman called Sandra White, who was actually sent by the mail on Sunday when Sharon Churchill went down to find Virginia, and this photo was literally produced out of the bookcase, and it wasn't planted there. Sandra White, who spent weeks with Virginia, a pretty experienced journalist, has no doubt that this photo is genuine, that Virginia Giuffre is genuine. The evidence that people like Victoria Harvey produce, I have to say, is pretty thin. And we also have testimony of Andrew talking on emails with Ghislaine about Virginia Giuffre, how they're going to deal with her, bringing in a PR firm to deal with her. We have examples of the photo books in which Andrew actually picked Virginia Giuffre and actually ordered her like you might order a pizza.
Why would they take a photo? Why would they let the photo be taken?
Well, lots of people take photos, take selfies. Well, why did they let it happen? I think they didn't think it would ever emerge. And if Sharon Churchill hadn't found Virginia Giuffre, this story probably wouldn't have emerged. Try and put yourself in the position. This is this young girl. She's been told she's going to meet a prince. She's excited. She wants a little souvenir to give her mum. It's the heat of the moment. And no one thinks twice of that this photo is going to be incriminating in any way. And it's not incriminating. All it is a picture of Andrew with his hand around the waist of a girl. What makes it incriminating is that Andrew then denied this photo. If he just said, yes, I met this girl, she asked for a photo and I gave it to her, full stop. Or actually, yes, I did meet her, we went to bed, but, I'm a single man, she's 17. I know it seems a bit sleazy, but it's fine. But he didn't. He pretended he didn't know her when it was quite clear he did know her. And there's plenty of evidence to support that. And of course, we have, I think, much more damning evidence in that picture of him saying goodbye, the video of him saying goodbye to Catherine Keating at the door of the New York townhouse. And this is a very affectionate farewell from someone he's, I think, probably had more than a cup of coffee.
What about the catalogue that you says Ghislaine Maxwell had, a catalogue of women? Is that for people just to pick who they want, like a prostitution ring?
Yeah. So people could go through the photo book and decide who they wanted to have, and then that was the girl that was trafficked. Otherwise it seems a bit of a sort of tall order. By chance she's taken there in the hope that she might appeal to Andrew. This system is basically Andrew chooses the one he fancies and she's brought to him.
When you say trafficked, were these girls prostitutes or were they being forced to do this?
Well, a lot of the girls were young models who were promised that their careers could be helped. Trump ran a young model agency, so did Jean-Luc Brunel, who provided a lot of the girls, so did Epstein and Lex Wexner, Victoria's Secret. So these girls, I think, were kind of trapped. I mean, they were young, they were away from home, they often couldn't speak English. They were perhaps having to accept that in order to get on in their careers, they might have to do things they didn't feel very comfortable with. So I don't think they were prostitutes. I mean, I think Virginia Giuffre eventually became a sort of trophy that Epstein used with people like Andrew, and the fact that she was then paid and rewarded for this. But I think a lot of them were young girls hoping to make a career and finding that actually they were sex slaves. Poor girls talk about being on the island and literally trying to escape by swimming in shark-infested waters. This is not people who were, shall we say, very happy with their situation.
Yeah, because I think the word traffic gets thrown around too easy now, where people are trafficked, but if they're young girls and they're being abused, that's a different story, But for other girls who are willing to sell their body. You go to places like Dubai or all these hotspots now, there's prostitutes everywhere who are willing to do that job to get their money and do what they can. But you're saying a lot of these girls were trafficked, forced, kind of put into a corner to then do what they're told.
Yes. You know, a lot of them came, say, from Jean-Luc Brunel's model agency. They came from Paris. A lot of them came from Russia. You know, these were not professional escorts. These were young girls who had trusted Ghislaine Maxwell or the heads of these model companies, thinking that they would promote their careers, and they were just being used to service older men.
Being groomed. So when Epstein got sent to prison the last time, what was he in for that time?
Well, he got off the charges, most of the charges down in Florida, but eventually charges were brought to him on a federal basis in the court in New York. So that in the summer of 2019, he was picked up and taken to prison. Now, what we've got to remember is this was the whole beginning of the whole judicial process. He had actually managed to get away, get out of these problems in the past. He had very good lawyers. And I think he must have thought that he was going to get out this time, which makes his suicide seem very unusual. And there are a lot of things that are unusual about it. That his cellmate who was there because he was on suicide watch was removed. The guards fell asleep at a convenient time. The cameras didn't work. The man who did the autopsy, and the official autopsy is still secret, but Mark Epstein, his brother, asked for a separate one from a very respected figure called Michael Baden, who is the coroner for New York, and he came to the conclusion it was homicide rather than suicide. I've seen interviews with prisoners saying that you can't commit suicide in those cells with those sheets, given the height of the beds. So, and most people, from the lawyers through to all sorts of people, don't feel that Epstein committed suicide. I mean, he had too much still to play for to give up.
What's the speculation around who killed him?
Well, I mean, there are lots of people, who clearly would be happy to have him be silenced. I mean, any of the men who might have appeared in the book. I know that Epstein and Trump had fallen out. Epstein had thought that Trump would pardon him. I understand that Epstein was threatening to blackmail Trump. So Trump could be a candidate. I'm not saying he is. I understand that the person who probably committed the murder was another prisoner who was then either given a pardon or a reduced sentence in order by doing this act.
Was Trump president at the time?
Yes.
And what's the connection? Because you see the video with Trump and they're dancing and saying, "I love Jeffrey." He's got the same kind of, they like young women. And then obviously now we've got weird behaviour between Elon Musk saying Trump was on the island, he's on the flight logs, and then Elon Musk has got a black eye. That was just all conspiracy talk. But how connected was Trump and Epstein together? Because it seemed very friendly. I know a lot of people love Trump. For me, it's just, they're all the same sort of puppets. It's really the people behind the curtain that I'm really love to question. I think people buy into the politics and the left and the right and all the other shit that comes with it. It's the classic divide and conquer. But how connected was Trump with Epstein?
Well, they were very close friends. I mean, there's lots of testimony from people who knew them, including Michael Wolff, who interviewed Epstein and is Trump's biographer. And I have material in the books. I mean, they were very, very close friends, same sort of interests. I mean, women and golf, women and money between the two of them, and golf with Andrew. So, I mean, there's no denying, though Trump has tried to distance himself over the years, there's no denying that they were very, very close. Why is Trump, trying to destroy these papers if he's innocent? Pam Bondi has talked about the number of references to Trump. I think so has Krish Patel. So it's not just Elon Musk who's come forward. Lots of people have talked about the references to Trump. There's stories about, literally scores of FBI officers being brought in to redact material. So Trump campaigned on the basis that he would open this material up, but he then changed his mind. And you have to ask, why has he changed his mind? Is it because he realized actually just how incriminating the material is to him?
Now, it might seem a bit far-fetched, but could Trump have potentially run for presidency just to get his hands on these files and destroy them? Could that be that's a total calculation, but is that a possibility, how smart this man is?
Well, certainly, the fact he's president has given him the ability to get rid of these files. I mean, he's put tame people into various jobs. I mean, particularly in justice and the FBI. So, yeah, I mean, certainly by winning the election, I'm sure there are other reasons why he stood, but he is in a powerful position to destroy the evidence against him.
How many times was Trump on Epstein Island?
Well, we don't know. I mean, I'm not sure he appears even in the flight logs, but that doesn't mean if he doesn't appear in the flight logs, it doesn't mean he didn't fly to the island, because there are other logs. And we just don't know if we just don't have the records to show that he went there, but he could have done. I think he was probably more wily than some of the people like Andrew, so he probably had his own jet that way he went down in, and then just turned up or whatever. Stuff was done perhaps at Mar-a-Lago that people don't realize. So Trump will have covered his tracks, I think, pretty effectively.
So when Epstein is suicide in prison or killed, then when does it all come out about Andrew in Virginia? When did all that come out? Was it about the same time?
Yes, it comes, I mean, Sharon Churcher goes and finds Virginia. She then writes an article. I mean, Virginia then talks to her, having been silent for the previous decade, and the story breaks in the spring of 2011.
And what happens then? So 2011, this story was out?
10 years after some of these events.
2021?
Yeah. Well, 2001 is when Virginia and Andrew have the photo taken. So 10 years later, the story breaks, 2011. And in some ways, the real sort of catalyst is November 2019, when Andrew goes on Newsnight to try and address all the things that have come out in the press. And he makes such a mess of it that he looks more guilty than people realized. And at that point, Virginia Giuffre decides to bring a civil action, not a criminal action, against him. And that's when he loses all his royal status. And that's shortly after that is when he does his special deal with her.
So he never had a civil case before that interview?
No, it was just stuff in the press before that. And, he could have weathered this. If he hadn't gone on Newsnight, the story might have died.
Yeah, it wasn't that deep. If there's no civil case, yes, it's a couple of scandals, but it's not that deep where he needed to defend himself. Defending himself like that shows me that there's an element of guilt, and trying to speak your way out of it and try to fool the public. But like I say, the British public ain't fools. We're very switched on. We can see people's presence, their mannerisms. Something's off there.
Yeah. Well, also, he tried to avoid, he refused to cooperate with the law enforcement agencies, even just as a material witness, so not even as a suspect of any sort. And then when they were trying to bring summons against him, he ran up to Balmoral and hid there in the hope that, they wouldn't be able to give him the summons. Again, that's not the sign of an innocent man.
And they paid the $12 million to then get it over with.
And he hoped shut down the story and it would be all over. But of course, it isn't all over. It keeps coming. There keep being new disclosures. And, he's sort of back where he was. It's just $12 million poorer.
And when did Ghislaine get charged?
Ghislaine got, I think she's served a couple of years now. So a couple of years ago. But of course, she then disappeared. The FBI tracked her down to a boyfriend's house and on the Canadian border. And actually, what's extraordinary is that she could have gone abroad, particularly to countries without extradition treaties, and she could have actually avoided being arrested, but she somehow thought she would get away with it, that they wouldn't find her. So, I mean, the only person that actually has been tried and convicted for this whole scandal is Ghislaine, and people kind of feel she's the fall guy, but, she was clearly deeply involved. She is one of the major players. She is, I have to say, a congenital liar. What she told the Attorney General the other day to get her pardon it was a series of lies, and she was found to be lying in the course of the court case. So I don't think she is a reliable witness to this.
I think she will get out. I think she will be out before 2030.
Oh, I'm sure. I think she's probably out now. I suspect she's been sprinted away to some Caribbean island, and everyone thinks she's in prison, but actually she's sitting on a beach somewhere.
Because she was still participating, and that she was still are close links to Epstein, Clinton, all these high-profile names. There's a lot of names who should be in prison with her, with the information that's out there now. Has she been a scapegoat? I think she has. Does she deserve to be in prison? Of course she does. So I just think a lot of people have deflected with her, with the Epstein killing as well, with the Prince Andrew interview, the paying off the money. It looks as if it's just Glenn and Prince Andrew who's been the bad ones.
Well, that's clearly the aim, to keep it focused on a few people who are sort of identified, and hope that will sort of lance the boil. But as you say, there are many names which have appeared or been speculated on, and one hopes that they haven't been weeded out from these files, and that justice will be done. The witnesses, the victims, will be giving testimony, I understand, and they will have names that they can talk about. So I don't think, I think we will get more names, and people won't get off the hook.
How many girls came forward on Epstein Island?
Well, I mean, 10 women actually spoke at this press conference at Capitol Hill the other day. I mean, there were clearly, I think there were hundreds. I mean, people have talked about even possibly 1,000 girls that were abused. Problem is, we don't know their identities. As I say, they were basically brought in from places like Russia. They were girls who had really no identity papers, weren't checked in. One of the problems was, if you didn't have like a selfie of yourself on the island, how could you prove that you'd gone there? So I think there were a lot of girls who'd gone but couldn't prove it. And also a lot of people who went who are now middle-aged women with families, very respectable. Last thing they want to do is to rake over these controversies. A lot of them are very traumatized and clearly don't want to go through the whole court process. And they just prefer to sort of try and forget about it and move on with their lives.
Was there any came forward who were just after money though? Because you've still got to question it. A lot of these, even with the Harvey Weinstein, that he's an evil man, but there was a lot of people who were dismissed because of their lies and their false accusations. They're just wanting that money,
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable that you will have some people who will jump on the bandwagon, but that doesn't undermine the fact that, there were a lot of victims, justified victims that, and we need to address, give them justice, and, they are entitled to some sort of compensation from the estate for what they went through. So I think, we've just got to keep a very open mind. I mean, there will be some bad apples, but that doesn't mean they all are.
And for the Prince Andrew interview, who gave the green light for that?
Well, it was Amanda Thirsk, who was his private secretary, who he's very close to. Everyone else, said don't do it, and if you do it, prepare for it, set limits to what they can talk about, and make it very short. But he didn't do that. He basically gave Newsnight a carte blanche to ask what they wanted, and Emily Maitlis went in for the kill.
She was good, to be fair.
Yeah,
she was good. I'm surprised that they didn't have something signed to see the interview first. Apparently, he was so happy with it. What's that woman's name? Is it Sammy?
Sam McAllister.
McAllister. I speak to Sammy. I speak to McAllister. Is that her name, Sammy?
Sam McAllister.
I speak to Sam because she was saying he was so happy with it. They were thinking after the interview, even before the interview, they thought, that will not happen. Then they got it, and then after they'd done the interview, they were thinking, surely they won't put this out. But he was happy with it, how it went. He didn't want anything edited out.
How unself-aware he is. But he is a narcissist. He sees things only in his own terms. That's why there was very little sense of empathy with the victims. She gave him plenty of opportunities to kind of explain himself, to apologize. He didn't really do it. He was very, very literal in terms of the way he explained things. And everything was about how it affected him, not how it affected others.
So if the Ghislaine Maxwell, with her getting 20 years in prison, surely there must have been other names who should have been in prison also.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's a statute of limitations. I suspect not. So if names emerge in the release of documents, and if a case can be made in the way it was made against Ghislaine, then we may well see other people tried and possibly convicted.
And what about the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? For me, when Meghan came into Prince Harry's life, I'm not really a massive royal fan. I'm Scottish, but when I liked the idea of it, because I liked Princess Diana, I liked what she stood for, I liked that she had compassion and she was loyal. I respect her she had a lot of elegance, and she spoke out. against the bad in the world, and that takes courage, and when those two started dating, I thought, you know what, maybe he's trying to protect her because of the way Princess Diana died, and I thought, yep, go on. But then I started watching her, and she doesn't look a good person. She looks as if she's manipulated his mind, and that's what I get. I don't know them personally, I'm just making my own assumption from what I see. Like, they're going to stay back from the media, but then they're doing Netflix documentaries, book deals, podcasts, cookery shows. It just doesn't sit right. Something's not right. Is there a potential that he has been manipulated by Meghan?
Yes, of course. I mean, Meghan, has come in and she's using the royal family to make money for herself. And the two of them. It's sort of exactly what Fergie did, and Fergie's been doing. You can see, Meghan sees Fergie doing this for 30 years and thinks that she can do the same, half in, half out. So, but clearly this doesn't do much for the reputation of the monarchy if people feel that, we're paying for them and their security and housing them and all sorts of things, and yet they are just using the opportunities of and the privileges they're given in order to line their own pockets.
How true is the story that Prince Harry punched Prince Andrew?
Well, I mean, my source is reliable who gave me that story. I stand by it. Harry just discounts it and says it didn't happen. As we know, recollections can vary. What my publisher said is, this is literally a line in the book. We're not going to get into a fight over this, and we've put in a denial. He denies it, but it certainly doesn't undermine, my source or the credibility of what I've written. I think there was an attempt to try and do that. I think what's very interesting is he didn't come to me. He just publicly announced that he was going to write a lawyer's letter. A lawyer's letter was written. My publishers responded, and we've heard nothing more. So, if this is a serious thing, and there's been some defamation, I mean, how can you say that defending your wife is defamatory? Then it's interesting that he hasn't pursued this. So it's just another case of announcing things to the press, writing lawyers' letters, and then doing nothing.
Prince Harry punched Prince Andrew because of remarks made to Meghan?
Yes, I think there are two episodes. The punching episode is actually before before Harry met Meghan. There's another fight in 2017 after Harry has met Meghan. And basically what Andrew said is actually what William said, is don't rush into this relationship and make sure she's suitable. Are you concerned about this or that? Perfectly legitimate questions to ask, but Harry is quite hot-headed and clearly didn't like that.
How can you be taking relationship advice from fucking Prince Andrew?
Well, that may have been part of the problem.
Well, I would have punched him straight in the fucking nose if he tried to give me relationship advice. But who made the remarks against Meghan's skin colour? Is that true? Because Harry put that in the book.
Yes, I mean, and I think they then raised it on Oprah. I just don't know, but I find it hard to believe. I mean, I think they suggested it could have been Kate and did it, and accused the royal family of being racist. I find that very hard to believe, but I have no evidence one way or the other.
Why would Harry even say that? Why would he put that in the public domain about his family? But then again, if it's his wife and he loves her and someone did say it, then why not address it? But there just seems so much mess between the royal family now. There seems so much divide that doesn't seem strong. The monarchy was very strong. Britain was a very strong nation. It just seems as if everything's becoming weaker here. It's kind of lost to something.
Well, I think, once the Queen died, a lot of people supported the monarchy because of the Queen. And we now have a king who is ill, a Princess of Wales who's ill. The scandals or the problems of Andrew and Harry. So it is very vulnerable at the moment, and there's uncertainty. How long will Charles live? What are the relations like between Charles and William? So I think when there's that sort of uncertainty, of course, the monarchy is under some threat. I mean, there's still more than half the population support the monarchy. I think they think it's the best option. They don't want to have a president. So I think, they've weathered storms, before. It's lasted 1,000 years. There's no reason why things shouldn't continue. But I would argue they need to be reformed. There needs to be more transparency and accountability, not least about their finances, but also about, for example, the historical record, that they need to release files. They need to be much more open with the public and not try and curate the story. There are all sorts of deals between the palace and newspapers and pressure put on people in the way that we saw that the palace put pressure on ABC television in the States not to run anything on Virginia and Andrew, because if they did, they would lose all access for interviews with members of the royal family. So there were some pretty strong-arm tactics to try and suppress the story of Andrew and Geoffrey.
How is the relationship between Harry and William now?
Well, I think it's bad. I think Harry regrets what he says and would like to work his passage back. I think William is very reluctant to forgive him, and not least for the comments made about Kate. But there will be in anything like this where there are family issues as well as sort of more constitutional issues. It's going to be very difficult. But I think William has to sort of try and be mature about it and see what is best for the country. And it's not good if the two sons of the king are fighting, as it's not good for the heir to the throne and the king to have very different perceptions of what the monarchy should be doing.
What was the story about Putin having information on Andrew?
Well, that information comes from a man called Tim Riley, who has, I think, quite strong intelligence links. He picked it up in Russia. We know that Putin was passed some of these tapes from the Palm Beach Police Department that were taken to Russia. But Tim Riley says that there's compromat there. I don't think it would surprise anyone that whenever Andrew went to Russia, he probably was bedded by some nubile interpreter or someone, and this material was filmed. It's a classic Soviet trick. So, he may well have placed himself in a vulnerable position in Russia, as I say, in other countries as well, Libya and China and the Middle East.
And what about the gun runner friend from Turkey with Prince Andrew?
Well, there's the Tariq Khatuni is the Libyan gun runner, and he seems to have been a sort of business associate of Andrew. He's given gifts to the family, very generous, gifts, £18,000 necklaces. And there seems to be some sort of business relationship there. There's a man called Selman Turk, who was in a court case where it emerged that £1.1 million was paid to the Yorks, which they haven't been able to explain. So, there are a lot of unanswered questions about the Yorks' wealth, and the fact that they're not prepared to answer them does make one concerned about where this money has come from.
See, when you write a book the way you did, does that go back to the royalties where they can then challenge it and say if it's true or not?
Well, I mean, they can sue me for libel. We didn't give the right to reply to Andrew and Fergie for the simple reason that we thought they would just enjunk the book, they would try and shut it down, that they would tie it up in legal, what's called lawfare, basically try and just shut it down with using the legal system. So all the stuff is sourced, it's been verified, and we felt confident that it would stand up if they were to take action, and so far there's been no action whatsoever. I think there was a mistake made not to run the Prince Harry story by him first, but it's literally one line in a book of over 400 pages, and we just didn't think it was very important. We didn't think actually it was particularly offensive. So that was our mistake. But of course, one wants to make sure that everything is fair and accurate, because otherwise one's going to be in big trouble.
I actually like Prince Harry. I don't know the guy, and Kate seems very elegant. She seems perfect for the royal family. I know she's got her health issues. I'm not a doctor, but I can only speculate from what people tell me. But how deep is it all? How deep is with your Epsteins and Trumps and Bill Clintons and Prince Andrews? How deep is it? Are we talking paedophile rings? Are we talking just sleazy men who like to abuse women, who are just so rich that they've not got anything else? Like, how deep is it all run, all these operations? Like, are we talking satanic? Are we just, like, how dark is it?
Well, I've seen no evidence that they're satanic. I mean, there's clearly big networks there, and there are lots of men involved, and there are very extensive files that could be released. So it is a big thing. I mean, people have talked to say about 1,000 victims. So, but we won't know until any material is released. I mean, so far we've had only little snippets of information. So it's there's all to play for in this situation.
Do you think we'll ever get any information? Because when Donald Trump says that there was no connections to Epstein, that's a big no-no for me, because this was the man who was going to expose it. This was a man who was going to release the files from the JFK killing. It's like when these people get in power, Donald Trump's never started any wars, but he seems to be doing a few now. But he's dropped a few bombs in a few countries now, and I just think all these people are corrupt. All these people are full of shit. They make these big promises but don't back it up. Like, these Epstein files are so popular. Like, what do you think when he says, like, there's no one else on these lists?
Well, I think we've learned not to believe a word that Trump says. So, no, of course. I mean, Trump is in those files. He may now have been excised. And there are lots of, some very influential people who will have been in those files. Again, they may be redacted or removed. But, this is a big scandal.
It just seems all dark, it seems very messy, where there's never going to uncover the truth because there's too many big names involved, There's too many big names who have got too much power and too much wealth and too much to lose. What did you think when you seen Elon Musk saying that he'd seen Trump on the files?
Well, I think Elon Musk, didn't make that up. I mean, he's clearly changed his mind, but, I think that the files were seen there.
Do you think the fallout was legit between Elon Musk and Donald Trump?
Yes, I think, Trump, has been very rude about Elon Musk and vice versa. Musk, realized how difficult it was to make changes in government. He clearly had problems with his own business career as a result of his involvement with Trump. So I think, he left government to make sure his business was okay. And they were clearly not on the same wavelength. So I don't think there's anything suspicious about the parting.
Tell me this, do you ever feel your life could be in danger by writing such a book?
No, I mean, I think people try and undermine my reputation and try and dismiss me as a writer, but I haven't, no worries I'm going to fall under a bus.
What's your plans for the future?
Well, I'm going to do a book on Prince Philip next, so maybe we'll talk again in 3 years' time.
Yeah. For writing the book, it's guts and courage, and I think you're a great journalist for doing all the work, for doing all those interviews. Like, that's what we need nowadays, people to be thorough and people to do the right checks and be very balanced. Even though it's balanced with the information you have, it's not a good look for the royal family. It's not a good look for everything, but fair play. Again, where can people buy your book?
Yeah, it's entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York. Should be available in all good bookshops and on Amazon.
Again, listen, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot.
I wish you nothing but the best for the future. And again, well done with the book.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.